Imagine this. You're standing on a beach in modern Florida, watching the sunset splash brilliant oranges and purples across the sky. Then suddenly you realize that under your feet lies one of the most mysterious landscapes on Earth. This is no ordinary stretch of land. It's a peninsula that has quietly held secrets for thousands, maybe millions of years. Secrets that mainstream science struggles to make sense of. Mysteries that shake up everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations, prehistoric life, and the very foundations of human history. Florida, that sun-soaked getaway known for theme parks and retirement communities, is actually a gold mine of archaeological oddities that would leave even the most experienced researchers scratching their heads in confusion. From sunken cities older than any known civilization to bizarre rock formations that seem to ignore the laws of physics, the Sunshine State offers more questions than answers. Tonight, we're going to take a trip through time, plunging into the most puzzling mysteries Florida has to offer. We'll look at ancient structures that shouldn't exist, weigh evidence of civilizations that mainstream archaeology refuses to accept, and dig into events that make you question whether everything we've been taught about our past is just a carefully built story. So, get comfortable because what you're about to hear will shake up your understanding of history, science, and maybe even reality itself. Chapter 1. The underwater pyramids of Bimini, just off Florida's coast in the crystal clear, our waters near Bimini in the Bahamas, sits one of the most hotly debated archaeological finds of modern times. The Bimini Road, as it's often called, is made up of huge limestone blocks laid out in what looks like a planned pattern stretching nearly half a mile along the seafloor. When pilot Robert Brush first spotted these formations from the air in 1968, he couldn't believe what he was seeing here. Under 25 feet of water was what seemed to be an old road or maybe the base of a giant building. The blocks, some weighing many tons, are fitted together so carefully that it seems hard to believe they form naturally. Dr. Manson Valentine, a zoologist and amateur archaeologist, was one of the first to dive down and get a close look at these structures. What he saw didn't add up. The blocks weren't just random pieces of limestone. They were fitted together neatly, some with tool marks and others with what looked like mortar between the joints. But here's where it gets really strange. According to standard geology, this area was above sea level around 12,000 years ago during the last ice age. If these structures really were built by humans, and if they were made when the land was dry, then we're looking at construction that happened thousands of years before the earliest known civilizations. The implications are enormous. Who could have put together such massive structures? What advanced society lived in this area at a time when mainstream archaeology says humans were still living in small hunter-gatherer groups? And why does the academic world seem so unwilling to seriously study these findings? Some researchers think the Bimini Road might be tied to the lost city of Atlantis, the legendary civilization described by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. Plato placed Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which would put it somewhere around the Caribbean or near Florida. Edgar Cayce, the well-known American psychic called the Sleeping Prophet, said in the 1930s that parts of Atlantis would rise again near Bimini in 1968 or 1969. And remarkably, the Bimini Road was found in 1968, exactly when Cayce predicted coincidence or proof of something much deeper. The debate around the Bimini Road heated up when geologists started saying the formations were just natural limestone shaped by geological forces over millions of years. But that explanation doesn't account for several puzzling details at the site. For example, many blocks clearly show signs of being cut and shaped with tools. Some have perfectly straight edges and right angles that would be nearly impossible to create through natural erosion. Others show what looked like anchor holes, round indentations that could have held ropes or chains. What's more, core samples taken from underneath the blocks have shown that the limestone sits on a base of sand and coral, which suggests the blocks were placed there on purpose, not formed where they lie. Dr. David Zink, a former English professor who spent years studying the site, made some surprising finds during his trips there in the 1970s. His team uncovered what looked like a stylized head carved from stone, geometric rock formations that seemed too regular to be natural, and several artifacts that didn't fit the standard timeline of human life in the area. One of the most fascinating discoveries was a piece of worked stone that seemed to contain traces of metal, possibly iron. That was especially confusing because the usual archaeological record says metalworking didn't reach the Americas until much later. The mystery gets even bigger when you think about the full scale of the Bimini Road. The main formation runs about 1,600 feet, but aerial surveys have picked up more structures in the surrounding area. Some researchers believe that what's been uncovered so far is only a small piece of a much larger complex that stretches for miles across the ocean floor. Satellite images have shown what appear to be more geometric shapes under the water around Bimini, including what some see as rectangular foundations and circular patterns. There could be the remains of old temples or ceremonial buildings. Chapter 2. The Coral Castle Mystery. Moving from the underwater puzzles to something just as baffling on dry land, we come to one of Florida's most mysterious structures. Coral Castle, located in Homestead. This isn't just another tourist stop. It's a monument to impossible engineering that still leaves scientists and engineers scratching their heads today. The story starts with Edward Leitzkolin, a Latvian immigrant who stood barely 5 tons tall and weighed only 100 pounds. Between 1923 and 1951, working completely alone and mostly at night, this tiny man somehow managed to dig up, carve, move, and put together over 1,100 tons of coral rock into an elaborate complex of structures that defies any simple explanation. Now, when I say this defies explanation, I'm not exaggerating. We're talking about massive blocks weighing up to 30 tons each, moved and placed so precisely that you can't slide a piece of paper between the joints. Some of these stones are balanced so well that despite their huge weight, they can be moved with just a light touch. The Niton Gate, for instance, was so perfectly balanced on its pivot that visitors could open it with a gentle push. Even though it stood 8 feet tall and 16 inches thick, when the gate finally stopped working in 1986, a team of engineers with a 50-ton crane and laser measuring tools had to figure out why. They found that the pivot point had shifted by just a tiny fraction of an inch, proof of the incredible accuracy of Leitzkolin's work. But here's what makes this truly mysterious. Leitzkolin did all this using only simple tools he made himself. No heavy machinery, no construction crews, no modern equipment. Neighbors said they saw him working by lamplight, singing to the stones in his native Latvian, and somehow moving these giant blocks as if they weighed nothing at all. When people asked how he pulled off this impossible task, Leitzkolin would only say that he understood the secrets of the ancient builders, that he knew how the pyramids were built. He spoke vaguely about magnetism, electricity, and cosmic forces, claiming he had rediscovered the lost knowledge of the ancients. Some people who knew him said they saw him place his hands on the coral blocks and appeared to make them move on their own. Others said he had some kind of device that could cancel out gravity or manipulate magnetic fields. But no one ever saw exactly how he did it because Leitzkolin was extremely private about his methods and always worked alone. The coral blocks themselves present another puzzle. Let's dug them from his own property. But how did he cut them so perfectly? Coral rock is famously hard to work with because it's both tough and brittle. Modern quarry operations use diamond-tipped saws and hydraulic equipment, yet Leitzkolin got cleaner cuts and more exact angles using primitive tools. The way some structures at Coral Castle line up with the stars adds another layer of mystery. The complex includes what seems to be an accurate sundial, a stone crescent that perfectly frames the North Star, and other astronomical features that show a deep understanding of how the heavens move. Leitzkolin said he was building the castle for his Sweet 16, a young woman from Latvia who had called off their engagement. But researchers have noticed that the astronomical alignments might mean something more, possibly linked to ancient star knowledge or even communication with extraterrestrials. The magnetic qualities of the site have also drawn interest from researchers. Some have picked up strange magnetic readings throughout the complex, and stories persist about electronic devices acting up in certain parts of the castle. In the 1940s, a team of engineers from the University of Miami tried to study Leitzkolin's building methods. They were especially curious about his talk of magnetism and electricity, but Leitzkolin refused to work with them, insisting that his secrets would die with him. True to his word, Led Scullin took his secrets to the grave when he passed away in 1951. He left behind detailed drawings and notes, but they're written in a code that no one has been able to fully crack. The notes are packed with references to magnetic currents, cosmic forces, and math that seems to blend real physics with mystical ideas. Some modern researchers think Leiden might have figured out a way to tap into the Earth's magnetic field or harness zero-point energy. Others believe he may have rediscovered acoustic levitation techniques supposedly used by ancient civilizations. The sound theory is especially interesting because several visitors to Coral Castle have reported hearing strange humming or resonant tones in certain areas of the complex, especially during particular weather or times of day. Chapter 3. The Crystal River Archaeological Complex. Deep in Florida's Nature Coast sits one of the most important and mysterious archaeological sites in North America, the Crystal River Archaeological Complex. This is not just another ancient settlement. It's an advanced ceremonial center that challenges what we think we know about prehistoric Native American skills and their links to faraway civilizations dating back more than 2,000 years. The Crystal River site was home to a complex culture that archaeologists still struggle to fully understand. The site includes elaborate burial mounds, ceremonial platforms, and most intriguingly, a set of artifacts that seem completely out of place in prehistoric Florida. The largest mound at the site, called the Temple Mound, rises nearly 30 feet above the surrounding land and covers almost 2 acres at its base. This massive earthwork required moving thousands of tons of soil and shell without metal tools, wheels, or pack animals. But it's not just the size of the construction that makes Crystal River mysterious. It's how advanced the culture that built it was. Archaeological digs have uncovered evidence of long-distance trade networks that stretch thousands of miles, bringing rare materials from as far away as the Rocky Mountains and the Great Lakes region. Among the most puzzling finds are carved stone tablets covered in what looked like hieroglyphic writing. These tablets, found in burial spots, display symbols that closely resemble ancient writing systems from around the world, including Egyptian hieroglyphs, Phoenician script, and even what some researchers say are Celtic Ogham inscriptions. One tablet in particular has stirred up a lot of debate, known as the Crystal River Tablet. It features a series of carved symbols that some researchers believe represent a form of ancient writing that predates known Native American picture writing systems. The symbols include spirals, crosses, and geometric patterns that also appear in other mysterious stone inscriptions found across the southeastern United States. Dr. Barry Fell, a Harvard professor and expert in ancient languages, studied photos of the Crystal River inscriptions in the 1970s and said they represented a type of ancient Celtic or Phoenician writing. According to his translations, the inscriptions talked about sun observations and religious ceremonies, suggesting that ancient, Old World peoples may have reached Florida centuries before Columbus. While Fell's ideas remain controversial and are rejected by mainstream archaeology, the inscriptions themselves are undeniably real and continue to puzzle researchers. The precision of the carving, the complexity of the symbols, and their presence in such an ancient setting raise questions about the true skills and connections of prehistoric Florida cultures. The astronomical alignments at Crystal River add another layer to the mystery. Several of the site's main features line up to mark important solar and lunar events, including the winter and summer solstice. This suggests the builders had advanced knowledge of astronomy and could carry out long-term observations and calculations. Ground-penetrating radar surveys done in recent years have shown that the visible structures at Crystal River are only a small part of the whole complex. Beneath the surface lie more foundations, possible roadways, and what look like carefully arranged post holes that might have held up large wooden buildings. The presence of exotic materials at the site points to extensive trade networks and cultural exchange that challenge standard ideas about prehistoric isolation. Mica from North Carolina, copper from Michigan, obsidian from the western United States, and shells from the Gulf of Mexico all made their way to this remote spot in ancient Florida. Perhaps most intriguingly, some of the copper artifacts found at Crystal River show signs of advanced metalworking, including techniques that weren't supposed to have existed in North America until Europeans arrived. Chemical analysis has shown that some copper objects were made using alloys and manufacturing methods that suggest a high level of skill in working metal. The burial practices at Crystal River also raise questions. Some graves contain people who were clearly of high status, buried with elaborate grave goods in specially prepared chambers, but others contain remains with unusual features, including some individuals who seem to have been much taller than typical Native Americans of that time. Studies of the bones from the site have found evidence of people who stood over 7 feet tall, far above the average height of prehistoric Native American groups. Some researchers think these might represent a separate genetic line or possibly proof of contact with people from other continents. The site's connection to water also seems important. Crystal River sits at the meeting point of several waterways, and the ancient builders clearly chose this spot on purpose. Some researchers have suggested the site might have served as a kind of port or trading hub, helping commerce and cultural exchange across vast distances. Recent underwater archaeological surveys in the springs and waterways around Crystal River have uncovered more artifacts and structures that seem to extend the site's reach into the water. Stone formations beneath the surface suggest the ancient people may have held ceremonies or rituals that involved the springs themselves. Chapter 4. The Windover Archaeological Site. In 1982, developers getting ready to build a housing subdivision near Titusville made a discovery that would change our understanding of ancient Florida and challenge basic assumptions about prehistoric life in North America. The Windover Archaeological Site, as it became known, preserved an 8,000-year-old burial ground in such amazing condition that it rewrote the textbooks on ancient American cultures. What makes Windover so extraordinary isn't just its age. Though 8,000 years is certainly impressive, it's the unmatched preservation of organic materials that normally decay within decades or centuries. Thanks to the unique chemical makeup of the penis where the burials took place, archaeologists found intact human brains, woven fabrics, and wooden tools that offered an intimate look at the daily lives of people who lived at the dawn of civilization. The discovery started simply enough. Heavy equipment operators noticed what looked like human skulls in the mud at the bottom of a pond they were draining. Early investigations showed that this wasn't just a few scattered remains, but a well-organized cemetery containing the burials of over 60 individuals spanning more than 1,000 years of use. But when researchers began studying the remains more closely, they realized they had come across something never seen before in North American archaeology. The oxygen-free conditions at the bottom of the pond had preserved organic materials in ways that seemed almost miraculous. Human brains, still containing intact neurons and cellular structures, were recovered from skulls that had been buried for 8,000 years. This level of preservation is almost unheard of in archaeology. Yet, here it was, giving researchers genetic material that could unlock secrets about the origins and movements of ancient American peoples. DNA analysis of the Windover remains produced results that surprise everyone. The genetic signatures didn't match those of any known Native American populations. Instead, they suggested connections to people from across the Pacific, raising questions about how and when the Americas were first settled. Some researchers believe the Windover people might represent a separate migration to the Americas, one that happened earlier than the commonly accepted Bering Land Bridge crossing. Others suggest they might be descendants of ancient Pacific sailors who reached the Americas by seas that have been lost to history. The textiles found at Windover are just as remarkable, woven from plant fibers using advanced techniques. Some of these fabrics are among the oldest known examples of weaving in North America. The complexity of the weaving patterns suggests that textile production was already a highly developed craft among the strikes themselves. Lightning researchers have documented unusual patterns of electrical activity that don't fit standard models of atmospheric electricity. Dr. Martin, a professor at the University of Florida who spent decades studying lightning, has noted that Central Florida lightning exhibits several unusual characteristics. These include unusually long duration strikes, multiple return strokes that exceed typical parameters, and electrical signatures that suggest much higher energy levels than normally observed in lightning phenomena. The geographical distribution of lightning strikes in Central Florida also shows patterns that are difficult to explain using standard meteorological models. Rather than being randomly distributed or following simple topographical features, The strikes seem to cluster around specific locations in ways that suggest they're being influenced by factors that aren't accounted for in standard weather prediction models. Some of these lightning clusters correspond to known geological features, such as areas where underground water systems or mineral deposits might affect electrical conductivity, but others occur in locations where no obvious geological explanations exist, suggesting that unknown factors might be influencing electrical activity. The electromagnetic environment of Central Florida has been the subject of extensive study by both meteorological researchers and investigators interested in unexplained phenomena. The region shows unusual patterns of electromagnetic activity that extend beyond just lightning strikes to include unusual radio propagation, magnetic field variations, and electrical effects that impact everything from electronic equipment to biological systems. Power grid operators in Central Florida have long struggled with electrical anomalies that go beyond simple lightning damage. The region experiences unusual patterns of electrical surges, power quality problems, and equipment failures that suggest the presence of electromagnetic influences that aren't fully understood. Some researchers have suggested that these electrical anomalies might be connected to the unusual geological characteristics of Central Florida. The region sits on a foundation of limestone that contains extensive cave systems and underground water networks that could potentially create unique electrical conductivity patterns.